Good morning and welcome to Health Talk, sponsored by Mon General Hospital. This program is designed to provide education on vital health topics to help you take charge of your health. You'll also be introduced to Mon General's committed physicians, allied healthcare professionals, and quality programs and services. And now, here are your Health Talk hosts, Kay Murray and Jim Stallings.
Mon General brings you Health Talk every Thursday morning at 8:35 here on the Voice of Morgantown, WAJR. I'm Jim Stallings, host, and co-host Kay Murray. Good morning, Kay.
Good morning, James.
And with us in the studio, Dr. Roger Abrahams, and he is a pulmonary critical care physician on the Mon General staff. And today we're going to be talking about clinical trials. Good morning, Dr. Abrahams. Welcome back.
Good morning, Morgantown.
It's been a while since I think we've had you on the program, but I know we've had you on the program before. All right, what are clinical trials?
Well, clinical trials are the stages that the Federal Drug Administration requires that pharmaceutical companies do in order to get a product approved and on the market.
So if I come up with a bark from a tree that maybe help people with certain maladies, there is a process that I have to go to before I can put it on market in the United States.
Yes, the first thing you would do is have to show in the laboratory that the medication is safe, and they do a lot of animal studies to prove the safety of the medication. Then there are 4 stages of clinical trials that use humans. The first stage is where they take a small number of healthy volunteers and study the medication very intensely. And the studies we do in my office are what we call phase 3 studies. And this is the last phase before the medication is approved on the market. And those studies typically will have a lot more patients in them. So, for example, a phase 3 study might have anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 patients in it.
So are we developing medicines all the time here in Morgantown? Or
yes.
Are we testing them and doing all these things, going through clinical trials to get them on the market?
That's correct.
Is that typical of most medical facilities?
Not most medical facilities. There are certain medical facilities have an interest in this, and they participate in the clinical trials.
And so oftentimes we hear advertisements in the community on WAJR for people meeting certain criteria to be involved in clinical trials.
That's correct.
And they've already been tested for the most part on animals and other areas before they are tried on humans. Because people probably think they're guinea pigs or something, right?
And there are a lot of safety measures built in. So, for example, first of all, the Federal Drug Administration oversees all the clinical trials to make sure that they are done safely and that the results are reliable. There's a second phase built in that's called an Institution Review Board, or an IRB. And that's a group of lay people who oversee the clinical trial, and their sole purpose is to make sure that the study is done ethically and that patients are not put in undue harm's way.
Are you aware, or can you think of any clinical trials that occurred here in Morgantown that perhaps went on to being approved by the FDA?
Oh, yes. We've been doing clinical trials for close to 20 years, and we probably participate in about 5 trials a year.
And so any particular medicines or anything that we might be familiar with that you can think of?
Well, a lot of for example, formoterol, we participate in some of the clinical trials. There's a new one called Dalaresp that's on the market now. We participated. A lot of them go to achieve the market. However, some of them they find don't work, or there are safety issues, and therefore those don't get pursued any further.
Do a lot of pharmaceutical companies, will they go into a contract with Mon General to provide the studies? I mean, we hear about the high cost of research and development by the pharmaceutical companies, and perhaps that's maybe a reason why some of our pharmaceutical prices are high. A lot of research and development involved. And so if I'm pharmaceutical company A, and I think I have a new drug to treat asthma, so to speak, can I come to Mon General Hospital and get them to develop a study?
It's not that simple because in order the clinical trials are so specialized now that you really have to have the experience in order for the pharmaceutical want to come to your center to use your center. It's very important for the pharmaceutical company to have very precise work and to get the work done very quickly because they want to get their product to the market. And so they know that there are certain centers that do research that they can rely on.
When you say quickly and someone's doing this study with you, do you give them a timeline of what it's going to take for them to participate?
Give who, the patient, a timeline?
Yeah, absolutely.
No, well, in the clinical trial, there's sort of like a recipe or a cookbook that we follow in the clinical trial. So, for example, there may be, for a patient, there may be anywhere from 4 to 10 visits over a period of 6 to 12 months. And those visits have to occur on particular days.
Those that want to participate, do you accept everyone?
They potentially can be accepted, but any clinical trial has what we call inclusion and exclusion criteria. So, for example, if we're doing a COPD study, the study may require that patients have smoked a minimum of 10 years, that they don't have any abnormality on a chest X-ray, and that they don't abuse alcohol, for example. So if you don't fall into that category, then you wouldn't be accepted.
So you go through a screening process of sorts?
Yes. Actually, if patients are interested in a clinical trial, usually they'll contact the research center. The research center will discuss with them the details about the study and to see whether they think they will qualify. If it looks like they will qualify, then they're invited in for what's called a screening visit. And during that screening visit, the patient gets free testing to help determine, for example, if they have the disease that we're interested in studying.
For instance, are you recruiting any people for any clinical trials right now?
Yes, we're recruiting patients for, we basically do COPD clinical trials. And we have some ongoing trials now and several other trials that will be starting over the next few months.
So Morgantown Pulmonary Clinical Research is looking for people to get involved in a COPD clinical trial?
Yes.
Okay, so what should they do? Well, first of all, who would qualify for this particular study?
Well, it's good that you mention it because some people, for example, 50% of the people who smoke cigarettes don't know that they have a diagnosis of COPD. So if they're a smoker and they think they might have a diagnosis, they could come in and see if they would qualify for the clinical trial. And one of the tests we do is a free breathing test. So it would help them determine if they have the disease or not.
So you're looking for smokers?
Yes. To be in a COPD trial, obviously that's a disease of smokers.
Because you're treating the COPD, and so you need people that who may possibly have COPD but don't know it.
Correct.
Our number is 304-296-0041. Dr. Roger Abrahams is our guest this morning. If you have any questions about clinical studies, if you have participated in them or more than one, let us know how it went for you and what was the benefit. We're going to ask Dr. Abrahams the benefit for you as a patient or a participant in a clinical trial. But we'd love to hear from you. What are your experiences? 304-296-0041.
This is Mon General's Health Talk. If you have a health-related question, call us now at 304-296-0041.
Dr. Roger Abrahams, a pulmonary critical care physician at Mon General Hospital, is our guest on Health Talk today. And in the first segment, we talked about COPD, but good point. Maybe some people don't know what COPD is. What is COPD?
Well, COPD stands for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And patients who are smokers can either develop chronic bronchitis or emphysema, which is under the catch-all phrase of COPD.
And can that be reversed if we have the beginning stages of COPD? We quit smoking and take medicine. Can that be reversed?
Unfortunately, most of it is not reversible. Sometimes when people stop smoking, the mucus production diminishes, but there is a lot of irreversible damage.
What is the benefit, besides getting to try some medicines absolutely free of cost, for a patient to participate in a clinical study?
Well, it's true that they get the medication for free, and it's not just the medication. They get all the doctor visits for free and all of the testing they get for free. The second is that they get paid for their time and travel expenses. So typically, patients in the studies we do might get paid anywhere from $500 to $1,500, and that would entail maybe visits an average of once a month for 6 to 12 months.
Is there an age limit in all of this?
Depending on the clinical trial, there is an age limit. So, for example, patients with COPD, typically the age limit is 40 or older. And other benefits, patients get to try new medications, the cutting edge of pharmaceutical research, and these products are not yet available on the market. So, for example, if their present therapy doesn't seem to be working, it gives an opportunity to try a new medication to see if that might help. It also, patients, when they participate in clinical trials, it helps develop these new medications so that they, as well as other people, can benefit from the medications.
I'm thinking that our primary caregiver ought to have information on us participating in a clinical trial, correct? I mean, because if he's prescribing us certain medicines, we need to let him know in case how could he foresee an interaction problem?
Well, with the clinical trials, usually what we do is we will notify the patient's primary care physician if the patient gives us approval to do that. And then so we outline for the primary care physician what the medication is and if there are any potential side effects that they should alert us to that.
Once they start, can they stop?
That's a good question. In these studies, patients are perfectly free to drop out at any time they want. That's one of the other safety issues. So, for example, if a patient is participating in a trial and they think they're getting headaches more frequently and they think it might be related to the medication, they could just drop out.
But that's part of the study. I'm sure that you learned from that.
Yes, because, for example, if a lot of studies might have a small placebo arm, and, for example, if patients are taking a placebo and instead of the active medication and the dropout rate is greater in the placebo group, it tells them, well, the medication must be working because the ones getting placebo are dropping out because they're not getting the benefit. Now, most patients actually don't get placebo. So if a study has a placebo arm, there might be about 20% that got placebo. And a lot of other studies, there is no placebo. So a pharmaceutical company may have a new product, and they're trying to prove that their product is as safe or better than the standard of care medication that's on the market now. So you might either get the standard medication or the study medication.
I think that the design of the study is probably critical. Is that something that you do or to determine how many people you need, the placebos versus the meds? I mean, how do you coordinate and build a program for clinical trials?
The pharmaceutical company develops and designs the clinical trial with the oversight of the Federal Drug Administration. We get a protocol, which is like that cookbook or recipe, and then we have to follow this cookbook very precisely in order to conduct the clinical trial. And so, for example, one of the studies we do, there may be 25 sites in the United States that are participating in the study, and each one of those sites has to follow the same details so that we can make sure that the study is standard across the country.
I'm sure, like everything, though, the patient will have to sign off on this after you've explained everything step by step.
Yes, that's one of the safety factors, is that there's an informed consent the patient has to sign. The informed consent will go over in great detail any potential risks or side effects, potential benefits, exactly what's involved with the study, what testing is done. And so the patient will have to sign off on the informed consent.
All right. And if anything would happen to go wrong, now don't talk about that, but I mean, certainly there has to be
a reaction of some kind.
Or is it just safe enough that you know ahead of time that there hasn't been any harmful interactions with humans before?
Well, they are relatively safe. And we've been doing this almost 20 years, and I can't remember any bad adverse effect that we've had. But that being said, there occasionally could be an adverse effect. And what the pharmaceutical company does real time, they monitor all these 25 sites, for example, that are doing the study to see if there are any side effects. And there's a computer that analyzes all the data across the country. So me as a research investigator, within 24 hours, I have to report any adverse or serious adverse event. And then the computer analyzes to see if there are any trends of, for example, are more people getting headaches with the study medication than with a placebo.
Well, side effects don't keep it from the market. We know that. Now, always remember the Ambien commercial may cause drowsiness as a side effect. You know,
yeah,
that's a main effect, I think, of Ambien, but it says it may cause drowsiness. But just because there are side effects doesn't mean it doesn't eventually get to market, right?
Right. And even if there are potential side effects, most people don't get the side effects.
But again, you mentioned some patients get a placebo, but not in all studies.
Correct.
All right. So some studies. What about the COPD study? Will there be placebos involved?
Well, it depends on which study. So, like I said, most of the studies some studies will have a small placebo arm, some will have no placebo arm. So one of the studies we're doing now, for example, is comparing two active medications to another medication. So everybody is getting an active medication in that study.
If you have any questions or you'd like to make a comment, I'd really love to hear from somebody who has participated in a medical clinical study or trial. 304-296-0041, 296-0041 gets you in touch with Health Talk here on WHAR.
This is Mon General's Health Talk, providing the information you need to take charge of your health. Call us now with your health-related questions at 304-296-0041.
Dr. Roger Abrahams from Mon General is our guest today. We're talking about clinical trials. So let's say that I agree to a clinical trial. I know where to go and what time to show up. What can I expect to happen at a clinical trial? Am I just going to be left alone in a little room and be visited occasionally by a nurse?
No, in the clinical trials we do for COPD, a lot of the patients actually enjoy doing the clinical trials. It's almost like a social event for them. So, for example, a study might be testing an inhaler, and we want to see how long the effect of the inhaler lasts. So we'll give the patient the inhaler, and then in 15 minutes, we might do a breathing test. Then in an hour, we'll do a breathing test. Then 2 hours and 4 hour breathing test to see how long the medication lasts. Well, the breathing test only takes a couple of minutes. So what does the patient do the rest of the time? But we have the office set up with a TV for them. We have Netflix. Typically, we'll bring them in some snacks and lunch. And they just sort of enjoy the morning and interacting with the nurses.
Sounds like a good time.
A lot of the patients keep coming back for studies because they enjoy doing them.
And, of course, your magazines are up to date.
Yes.
All right. None of those 2-year-old magazines on the table.
My nurses make sure of that.
All right. And is this are most of these studies held within the walls of Mon General Hospital?
Well, these studies are conducted in my office, which is at Morgan Pulmonary Clinical Research on Pineview Drive.
Okay. So, again, should we just contact you, or should we refer to our doctor and have him refer us, or how does that work?
Well, probably the best bet is to contact the Morgantown Clinical Research, and their phone number is 304-598-2077. And they could ask for Linda, who is the study coordinator, or Tony.
And you're looking right now for smokers. What other parameters would people need to fit into to participate in the COPD study?
Well, the COPD study, patients need to be at least 40 years of age because typically people under that age don't have COPD. That's basically what, and sometimes there are exclusion criteria based on the medication, but if they call the research center, will go over all the inclusion criteria to see if they would qualify.
But some people smoke a little at a bar, perhaps when they're drinking, while other people's smoking is cigarette after cigarette. Does it matter?
Yes, patients would require 10 pack years. So basically, they would have to smoke 1 pack a day for 10 years, or, for example, a half a pack a day for 20 years, that amount of smoking in order to qualify. Because people who smoke less than that generally don't have COPD.
But it's not a smoking cessation program, is it?
That's correct, although when they come in, that is one of the things we will discuss with them, because our primary interest is taking care of the patient.
Do you find most people that are longtime smokers already are aware of the risks in COPD, or COPD is something new for them?
Well, like I said, I think all people know about the risk of smoking in COPD, but a lot of people have COPD and they don't know they have it.
And so if it's left untreated and we continue to smoke, eventually does that lead to our death?
Yes, the COPD gets worse and worse, and there's a tremendous, matter of fact, more people die of COPD than breast cancer and diabetes put together.
Wow. That's a startling statistic. Well, we're out of time. Thank you so much for being with us today.
You're very welcome.
You've been listening to Health Talk on WHAR with Dr. Roger Abrahams. He's a pulmonary critical care physician on staff at Mon General Hospital. Health Talk every Thursday morning at 8:35. Morgantown AM with Kay Marie and me, Jim Stallings, coming up on WHAR.